Jane Cooper is chairing this first panel of our afternoon. She's a professor of history at George Mason University. She's published 2 books in Ohio University Press's Indian Ocean Studies series. She has written extensively about pirates, slavery, and provisioning in the Indian Ocean. And she's currently a co-PI on a 3-year NEH production grant for Global Passages, creating a public database of slaving voyages across the Indian Ocean and Asia. And as we know, that database will ultimately be incorporated into the SlaveVoyages website. So thank you, Jane.
Thank you for this introduction. And it is my honor to introduce the 3 papers now. And now we get to see the future of slave voyages. I think this will be really exciting, especially for those of you that have not been attending weekly meetings in which Daniel tirelessly deals with our questions and concerns, and John has to respond to them. And as you can tell, this is something that's been going on for quite a while, so I'm very excited for them to share this with you. Let me first introduce Daniel, and I'm not going to provide his entire bio because I think you've heard it a few times, but I do want to highlight the fact that, again, in addition to his work on Brazil, his work on the Indian Ocean, his teaching and other work that he's been engaged in, he's been engaging in constant, probably headaches in dealing with this redesigning of the website. And it's been a substantial effort and probably more of an effort than he thought it was going to be starting out with. So it'll be wonderful to hear more about that from him. Next up, we have Dionne. Dionne Babineaux is a PhD student at Rice University. She holds a BBA in finance and a master's in urban planning and environmental policy from Texas Southern University. She engaged in earlier graduate and professional work. She's looked into topics from juvenile justice, depressed communities, food insecurity, and housing. And as you can tell, many of these studies focus on the issues and environments of contemporary Black populations. So her journey to graduate school is a little bit different than most other students of history. And so in her bio, she talks about how when she was homeschooling her 7th graders, she was shocked at the lack of African Americans referenced in Texas history books. And she began doing research into this history. And she founded a nonprofit, as well as engaging now in a much bigger WPA project that's a database of formerly enslaved interviews. And she's even put on exhibits about ancestry as well. So as you can tell, she has a diverse background and skill sets that really helps her be poised to help us out with the database here. And so in the fall of 2023, she began her first semester as a history student, and then she joined the Redesigned project shortly thereafter. And I want to underline her last comment here, which is that she finds her purpose in the role as a historian because it allows her to tell the stories of African Americans throughout several eras of history. And then finally, let me introduce John Mulligan. He is known as the person who maybe caused some of Daniel's headaches, but hopefully also is solving some of these problems. He's a humanities data scientist with the LMI Group International. When he was originally at Rice University at the Center for Research Computing, he contributed to numerous digital humanities, but especially the ongoing redesign of SlaveVoyages. Dr. Mulligan was also a lecturer at the Rice's Humanities Research Center. As you can tell from the doctor part, he holds a PhD from Brown University in English literature. And so I wanted to just flag here that in addition to doing all this amazing computer work, he's actually done significant work in the humanities. He's published countless articles, including in the Critical Inquiry, OUP, Notes and Queries, MIT's Leonardo, Practice and Experience in Advanced Research Computing, Green Theory and Practice, and the British Medical Journal's Medical Humanities. So we have a very distinguished group of people up here today, and they're going to tell us more about the future for slave voyages.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for sticking around and attending the afternoon sessions. Thank you, Jane, for the lovely introduction. Okay, well, my presentation this afternoon is called Redesigning SlaveVoyages.org from Project 1619 to Project 2025. I'm afraid, right, a lot has happened and changed since Rice University became the host of SlaveVoyages. We are from a period of interesting and exciting discussion about the history of the African diaspora, about the history of the United States, right? One that we are now all very concerned about the future of our respective projects. So maybe our redesign here will help navigate this situation and sustain our project into the future. Well, for those who are new to it, SlaveVoyages, what is it? It is a pioneer in the digital humanities. I actually discovered that we were doing digital humanities after being involved with the project many years, really. It is the largest database of slave voyages, freely available to the public on slavevoyages.org, currently hosted at Rice University, but soon to be moving to Harvard University. Right? Yay! Well, we use Oracle for Research to power our hosting, and it is at the moment still sustained by a consortium of institutions, of which the Hutchins Center is one of them. Recent history, you've heard a lot about it. The remote origins of the project trace to the late 1960s, right? With the publication of Philip Curtin's The Atlantic Slave Trade, a census. We've heard that yesterday with a conversation between David Altis and Professor Gates. Right. The more recent history of the project dates from the 1990s, when Altis, Richardson, Klein, Berendt combined databases, and with the support of the W.B. Du Bois Institute, they launched the first public version of the database as a CD-ROM in 1999, which cost, at that time, $190. If it sounds expensive today, imagine back then, right? Well, because our research group has always been very attuned to technological changes, right, we were very well aware that the internet might be the next frontier, that we have to prepare ourselves to be accessible through the internet, right, online. So we got together, we expanded the transatlantic slave trade database. At the time, only database of voyages available. And we built a website to make it freely, this time, accessible to the public, right? And in addition with other interesting contextual materials, including names of Africans rescued from slave ships, as well as estimates of enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic, images, and so on. The second redesign came about in 2019, and it's the version currently available to the public. And then in 2021, we moved that site to the consortium hosting the database, right, at Rice University. A little bit more about the SlaveVoyages 2.0 or the 2019 redesign. The images you see there changing on the screen are of the different pages of the website. It provided the public with a sleek interface with historical images shifting in the background, telling the history of the African diaspora from point of capture all the way from point of sale in the Americas. We were able to film an introductory video with Professor Gates also. It features on the homepage there for anyone to gain a quick introduction on the project and highlight some of the special features of the site as well. That's when we made a promise of building an Indian Ocean and Asia slave trade database. Jane appears on the video there making that promise, so we're trying to fulfill that one at this very moment. Right. And that's when we deployed the Intra-American Slave Trade Database, which launched with linked voyages capability. So we can connect voyages from the Intra-American to the transatlantic. And that became very important, for example, during the 1619 project, when the public became interested on the voyages of the White Lion, the Treasure, and how it connected to the San João Batista, the transatlantic ship that brought the enslaved that were subsequently transported to Virginia, right? And we added a 3D video reconstruction of a French ship, Paul Lahore, and we had a lot more features in the subsequent years, right? Including new databases focused on the individuals, both enslaved and enslavers. Right. what would be the next challenge or the next frontier aside from adding the Indian Ocean and Asia slave trade database? Well, we would have to thoroughly redesign the website because, in case you don't know, it was also surprised a lot of people involved in digital humanities projects to, computer language, they also age, right, and become obsolete, right? Surprise, surprise, right? We were thinking only about physical media like CD-ROMs, floppy disks, magnetic tapes, and so on. But now, even if it is online, if it's a code insert away, and then the community that maintains the internet, the World Wide Web, right, decide to change the language, now things start not functioning as they were supposed to. So we had to recode the whole site, right? And how to do that? Well, we decided to organize a workshop, get involved with programmers like John, right? And think about, well, since we're going to all do all this work, let's try also to accommodate some requests that we receive from the public, right, from the African American community, right, from the researchers involved in the project. They want to add new features. So we decided to fund this project through a grant we received from the Oracle, which frees some of the resources of hosting the site to development. And then we got 2 other big grants from the NEH. One of them, I'm afraid to share here with you guys, has been terminated. But the other one seems to be still active, so that's great, right? And we organized a workshop to receive all this feedback, brainstorm. We invited artists to talk to us and provide some insights. Also, members of the community, students, well, a lot of people. One interesting thing that I did this time is that I interjected an intermediary, right? We hired students from Rice's School of Architecture to draw a design book, right? Because in the previous experience that I had, programmers, they want to alert people what's possible and what's not possible to do. But in the process, they kind of turn people off, right? So it's not a good idea. People are excited, they want to see and do interesting things, and then the programmers are, no, that we cannot do that, right? So in the workshop, they were instructed to be quiet, right? The architects, students, they're gonna take notes, they're gonna design a book, and then you're gonna code based on the design book, right? Okay, that's the team currently working on the redesign. John is in the team, Jirel, tech facilitator. Domingues de la Monica, he actually coded the first website. Thassany, Derek, also working with us. The architects were Jessica and Anna, and the artist consultants were Kathy and April, who have been tremendous force, not just for our group, but for folks in California too, and their activities. They're powerful duo here. Really, really enjoy working with them. Okay, so this is how it looks like right now. This could be a beach anywhere in the world, but it's actually Galveston. We drew inspiration from our Texas-bound project and our location, the location of our university, Rice. But in the future, this all can be changed because of the new structure that we build around the website. So I'm going to click here. Right. Okay, here we are. This is the site. All right. Okay. So this is the site. It's very different now. We have translation buttons over here, menu options on this side. We included a search table, search bar. Folks can search for ship names or places. Right. We have options of other pages to explore, database of voyages, database of people, the time lapse, which is super popular, and other features like lesson plans, essays, and more. If you scroll down, we have a news bar, and then some descriptions or highlights about other pages and projects within SlaveVoyages. Right. Back to top. Right. If you click on Voyages, you'll get to the transatlantic database of voyages, but up here in the top right, you can switch to Intra-America or to all voyages. In the future, Indian Ocean will be added as a new interface there, and all the voyages will also be shown in the All Voyages tab. Right. You can go back to the home page by clicking here, or you can navigate to other pages by coming to this menu. Right. So, people, we divide in two sections. We have enslaved and enslave us. If you click on enslaved, you get to what is often called the African origins database. But here again, we can also highlight new data by building new interfaces. So in this case, we have Texas bound or all enslaved people here as well. You know, we will probably be adding a lot more information as we continue investing in projects like the Afro-Mexican trajectories, other projects around the slave manifests, and so on. Enslavers, it's organized by trades, transatlantic, inter-American, all trades. Here we have a list of names, voyages associated with individuals. They are all being listed here. Time-lapse. We have also important updates here. We have a new map, raster map, whereas before we had just tiles. Right? We can speed the time-lapse into time periods. That's an innovation. You can pause, you can click on a bubble, you can read more about that voyage. Right. You know. Another cool thing that I think Dr. Gates asked us to do is border countries. So now we have a layer. Folks can see where the voyages started, where they ended, right, in modern day boundaries. Right. Another cool layer that we added here, rivers. It's very important for historians. There you go. So we have this for transatlantic, we have for intra-American, and we're going to also add for all voyages. Right. Learn more. It gets to our blogging platform, and we can organize collections here, like the lesson plans, or one of my favorite, Texas Bound, which Dionne is going to talk about in just a moment. Right. Fantastic. 3D videos, they continue here. Estimates also available. We have essays, the intro maps, all those things already exist, right? One cool thing now is the documents page, right? Here, we are connecting our website, our database, to databases that contain digitized images of original documents available in different parts of the world, right? So, for example, the first examples that you have here are from the Slave Manifest series available in the National Archives and Records Administration. Right? If you click on a view document, you get to this viewer, and you can inspect the document, zoom in, zoom out, move to the next page. Right. Here, they are linked to the voyages and to individuals available in our database. So you can come here and see all this information available to the book. They are also linked here in the sources. So if you find this voyage record in the database of voyages, this source will be hyperlinked and will bring you to this image of the document. Right. So we have added here documents from the Slave Manifest series available at NARA, but we also have added thanks to our project on the South Sea Company that Taylin talked about it on the first day. Images from the British Library, Huntington Library, and Clements Library that hold archives that belonged to the South Sea Company. We hope that in the future, more libraries and archives will make their resources freely available online in their respective websites following the protocols currently available, so we can connect these images to our database of slaving voyages and individuals. See, these images are not on our servers. They are being streamed straight from their original repositories, right? They are getting the hits, right, the credits, right, when we pull these images up, right? We're just connecting to our resources. All right, folks. This is pretty much what I had to show. I'll be happy to take any questions at the end of the session. I will now yield the floor to Dionne.
Thank you for yielding the floor. So the discussion that I have to offer to you is a little different than a lot of the discussions we've had today or this week. Jane gave you a brief overview of my background and why I wanted to do this work. 6 years ago, before I landed on this path to learn history, I could not have predicted this moment. And for this reason, it is truly an honor for me to be here and to have this discussion with you. So you heard that I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was homeschooling my 7th grader in algebra, science, and Texas history. We relied on online curriculums and textbooks from secondhand bookstores for our lessons. Almost immediately, it became very clear that our history books were not going to be enough to tell about the African Americans from Texas's past. So I started looking for content to supplement our class discussions and working to learn the stories of Black Texans myself. And after our year together, my 7th grader moved on, but I decided to continue this deep dive into the past by formally becoming a student of history. During my first year at Rice, I learned about the SlaveVoyages project. I took the course, The Atlantic Slave Trade, with Dr. Domingues, where we read and examined journals of the South Sea Company. I saw details of the company's scheme to move African bodies across the Atlantic. I contributed more than 300 segmented pages of the company's minutes to the project and reviewed correspondence with ship's captains, conflicts between the British and Spanish royal officials, and witnessed their indifference when enumerating their lost human cargo. Learning this history led me to ask many questions, like, why didn't I learn this in school? And how do I reconcile this new knowledge with what I previously understood of slavery? And most importantly, how can I share this knowledge with others? So here's a quick overview of what we'll talk about. So it was during that first semester of deep questioning that Dr. Domingues reached out to ask if I would be interested in revamping a blog to cover 2 primary activities. The first was to discuss the identification of 3,000 voyages of enslaved people to Texas, and the student researchers contributed to Texas Bound by transcribing ship manifests between 1830 and 1860 that evidenced the trafficking of more than 15,000 people. Oh, sorry. The second project, though not limited to the Lone Star State, Texas, gathered researchers, community groups, and organizations to aid in the redesign of the SlaveVoyages website. The redesign process meant overhauling the infrastructure of the database and its programming. And amid the discussion of infrastructure and user interface, the redesign included a purpose to incorporate additional voices and views from outside of the normal research team. So in this way, creating the blog recognizes how history, research, and art were re-manifested in the Slave Voyages project. Dr. Domingues suggested I begin by communicating with the student researchers. During the project, they were asked to transcribe manifests and extract the names, ages, heights, and any other descriptive information of the trafficked people and place their details into spreadsheets. Some of the members of the group made attempts to match ship landings with announcements in local newspapers and other historical records like the census and the Works Progress Administration slave narratives. We decided the best way to interview the students was through a survey, and I sent these questions to 6 members of the research team. So how did you become involved? Could you talk about your work, your career interests? And these are very open-ended and encourage them to take it where they wanted to. So I want to share some of their responses. Caitlin L. said, I was intrigued by Slave Voyages because it made accessible millions of primary historical sources that educators and other members of the public could utilize. Sean W. was a history major from Austin, Texas, who studied the ancient Mediterranean civilizations, medieval and early modern studies. A part of his work involved taking the information he learned in the documents and making them available to the public through academic and community presentations. Sean was considering entering the priesthood in the Catholic Church after graduation. The research I have done has trained me greatly in detail-oriented work, in paying close attention to all the forms of data that sources can give us, including those pieces of information we didn't expect or weren't looking for at first, and in quickly making my work communicable. I've grown greatly in my ability to make information about very detailed-oriented work like this understandable for various audiences, and in my ability to use great care to present the information. All of those skills will be deeply important for me in seminary and beyond. Ben S. was a history student whose work with Slave Voyages gave him an appreciation for the importance of history that serves communities, not just academia. At the time of the interview, he worked as a digital humanities program manager in the library of an HBCU. This project exposed me to the use of big data in humanities research and offered me opportunities to present at academic conferences and for community groups. I skipped over Caitlin's intro, so I'm just going to say that quickly. But Caitlin was a history major from Austin, Texas, who joined Slave Voyages during her junior year. And at the time of the survey, she was pursuing a master's in archives and public history, which was very related to the work that she did in the project. And at the end of her quote, she says she wanted other people to learn and teach. She wanted to learn and teach about the experiences of enslaved people, discussions which I had rarely encountered before I entered college. So through their responses, I learned that the students understood the importance of their work and gained considerable skills from working with the project. I also discovered that they valued the project's connection to communities and were asking themselves many of the questions I struggled with and worked their way through them while sharing their work with others. Another aim of the blog is to share any ongoing research inquiries that connect to the Texas dataset. There are several existing articles contributed by researchers that discuss archaeology, family history research, post-emancipation communities, or freedom colonies, and efforts to locate people within the database. This is an example of Dr. Marco Robinson's article on locating Lucinda. Dr. Robinson is an associate professor at Prairie View A&M University and HBCU and a contributor to the blog. The 1,400-acre site where the university is located served as the Alta Vista plantation, where surviving records indicate that hundreds of enslaved people were subject to especially brutal treatment. Through the university's efforts to identify the people who were enslaved on the property, the researchers located the record for Lucinda in the Slave Voyages database. The 15-year-old entered Texas in 1858. Her place of residence lists J.E. Kirby, the owner of the Alta Vista plantation. After emancipation, she was recorded as a washerwoman on the same property. We know little else of Lucinda's story. Building and connecting fuller histories to people recorded in the database has been challenging for researchers, but I am optimistic that the continual digitization of records and connecting information will one day help our efforts to tell more personal histories. So Daniel spoke a little about this earlier, about all the groups that were involved in the Redesigned workshop. The SlaveVoyages project is a compilation of research efforts across several different institutions and organizations. It is the nature of this online repository that many of its contributors and users never meet. The project hosted a workshop that brought several communities together for 3 days, and I think of this workshop as an exercise of recognition. It recognizes the need for African American communities to be involved in research of their histories, its representation, and its usage. Artists, academics, and members of local heritage and community organizations learned more about the database, described their experiences with the online platform, and offered ways to enhance user experience. For me, a really significant part of the blog work came from engagement with artists Kathy Foley-Meyer and April M. Frazier. Both artists were invited to contribute to the redesign. Kathy is a mixed media artist based in Los Angeles who used the SlaveVoyages site for research on her article, 12 Voyages. Kathy's other professional work focuses on public exhibitions, symposiums, art, and music. She said she pored over the information contained in the database and struggled with how to achieve a representation of the humanity contained in the statistics. April researched her family history to discover ties going back to the late 1800s, which she used to create collages for exhibitions and to inspire her artwork. Before becoming a photographer and artist, she worked with the database implementation in the oil and gas industry. She's a graduate of Rice University who saw a reference to SlaveVoyages on the university's event calendar. During the workshop, the artists held creative sessions where they explored color palettes, imagery, to convey these complex feelings that they held about the project. These are actual photographs from the Redesign workshop. They were focused on making the site useful to the public. They requested features like language modification, accessibility, ease of use, captions, user guides, search saving, user logins, user tools, reworked data hierarchy, and data relationships. Kathy says, I was definitely concerned about the site being user-friendly to everyone, especially people of African descent, and not just those in academia and folks who are accustomed to looking at a large amount of data in their professional lives and then extrapolating some kind of meaning in it. I wanted to use my art to convey a message that the database is not as intimidating as it seems. I want to bring a sense of humanity back to the souls marked as inventory on thousands of manifests to show that they were more than a line in the metadata. April continued. Du Bois's use of photographs, color, and unconventionally designed graphs evoked a sense of power and advancement experienced by him and his peers that could not be ignored by viewers of the 1900 exposition. I desired to do the same with information from the Voyages database, to share an interpretation of the data through the eyes of an artist, compiled with my lived experiences as an African American woman in Texas. The Redesign workshop gave the SlaveVoyages team of programmers actionable feedback. Daniel actively sought input that the programmers John, Derek, and Thasani worked to incorporate into the redesign. There were subsequent meetings where the artist would review this information and then provide additional feedback. When I began working with the Slave Voyages project as a part of coursework, I was looking for ways to learn more about Texas history. I understood myself as a descendant with a relationship to the many processes that have been discussed here during these sessions. Graphs and diagrams are insufficient to describe the activity that were a part of or a consequence of the Atlantic slave trade. So through the work of the blog, I hope to help identify people from the past, their descendants, and the people of the present who work to unravel this history. And then I just have a few more of the replies from the surveys. So thank you all very much for listening. Bye.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Dionne. That was excellent. Okay. I'm going to take my full 20 minutes. Okay, thank you. Super. All right, so my name is Dr. John Mulligan. I'm currently the Director of Digital Operations in Barbados for their ROAD program, the Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny Digitization Project underneath that umbrella organization, where we're seeking to digitize all of the records in the Barbados archives and more broadly transform the cultural heritage sector there through a modernization program that brings it all into the digital age. And I can answer questions about that if you're interested, but it touches on a lot of the same themes that we're going to see here today. So this is a talk about infrastructure. I'm going to make it boring, but in a productive way, I hope. And I asked Jane to read my humanities credentials so that you won't hate me for what I'm about to say. Oh, yeah. All right. So I'm going to do something that I don't typically do in this talk. I usually take the following slides out and make it more humanities friendly, but I'll justify in the second part of the talk why I'm about to do what I'm about to do in the first part of the talk. So I want to talk about 3 different types of architecture for a site like this. And I want to say up front, none of them are spreadsheets. And SlaveVoyages has never been a spreadsheet, not even when it was in SPSS. Just remember that. Okay, so the first one, and a lot of this I'm borrowing from Alan Liu when I use certain language to talk about these architectures. But the first one, you can think of a type of website, like I personally think the internet peaked with Craigslist, but then again, I'm a millennial. This is what we might call a data pour. You have a database-driven website, you have an HTML template, and you put the shoe in the foot, or the other way around, right? But, and quite often you have to cut the heel to fit the shoe, right? You figure out what places you put what data in what structured way. And what's interesting about that is that it's actually not terribly different from the way that the data is structured in the relational database. A relational database, you can think about it as a series of spreadsheets that talk to each other, right? You have a link in one spreadsheet in a row that links to another spreadsheet, so that if you could walk across all of them all at once, you could see the bigger picture, right? For extensive data records. And that is what you see in something like this. This is actually in the upper right there. You see, and this is technically accurate, a little demo interface that I made when we first started our South Sea Company project, okay? Here, this is a more complex version of it, and this is how SlaveVoyages currently runs. This is a templated data pour with callbacks. So what happens is you call up a web page, and it doesn't just give you data to put on your web page. What it does is it gives you data, and then it gives you a whole bunch of stuff that's like bundled up JavaScript programming instructions that sits beside the data. So you're looking at something that's kind of pretty, and then you've got all these instructions that make the buttons do things when you click on them, and that's a callback. You notice when you go to SlaveVoyages and you run a search, the page doesn't totally reload, right? You just see the table reload. That's the callback happening, okay? So it's telling instructions to rewrite portions of the page on the basis of what you've done, right? So you get data in the first one, you get data and instructions in the second one, and here's the new architecture. And this is on YouTube, so you can go back through this if you're a glutton for punishment. Okay. This is a microservices model. Here, what we've done is we've taken all of the data that you dump out onto a web page, all the templating that you dump it into, all the on-page instructions, and we've ripped it apart from the data. Okay? So now what we have we'll just talk about two halves of this. You have the front end, which is all of the website that you see, and then you have the back end, which is the website for the website, a website not for humans. You can make requests of it, but you get back, you can actually read it if you want, but it's stuff that is not terribly user-friendly. It's instructions to the front-end site that tells it what to do, right? So what you have here are two applications, okay? And they talk to each other in order to make the website do all the fancy things that it does. But I can't emphasize this enough. SlaveVoyages already does a whole bunch of fancy things, right? And that's why it's lasted so long, and that's why it gets 600,000 visitors a year, right? But what this does is it allows us to start breaking apart different pieces of functionality so that we can start updating them, making them smarter, fixing them when they break, and we can do it faster. And it ends up being a bit more computationally efficient if you do it right. And I've done most of it right? Okay. But what you see here, is that Django site. This is what we've always had. But now you see a bunch of stuff broken out on the left. And then on the bottom, you see a whole bunch of other things that we want to connect to. Okay? All right, placeholder. 2, how did we get here? To the whole Redesigned project. We got here by virtue of the project coming to Rice and moving up into the cloud, rather than being hosted on Emory's servers. Emory put it into AWS, and they used a program called Ansible to rebuild their whole environment every time they deployed, and it worked. It was great. Emory did their whole infrastructure to AWS, in fact. It was a phenomenal undertaking that really hasn't been equaled elsewhere. When it came to Rice, this is a short history of all the things that have happened at Rice, going from conferences to NEH grants, to partnering with the University of the West Indies, to features in Rice magazines, to the grant we won from Oracle, which gave us basically no internet bills for the first 3 years of the project at Rice. And also, we're only paying 50% now for a couple of years, which is wonderful. Then we have our artists that we brought in. We have the Texas Slave Trade Conference. Congratulations again. We had a partnership with The Guardian. The number of times people called us and said, hey, that map that you've got, can we have it in our museum? And the answer had to be, sure, fly one of us out there and we'll put it on a box for you, right? Or put it up on a web page on, behind a screen in your museum and have someone keep clicking replay, right? But The Guardian called us for that series where they were accounting for their history with the slave trade. And they wanted to make the map, and they had a data person. And so he and I got into it, and I helped him build it out for their framework by telling him how to work with our data, right? And that was really instructive for me. And I'll get to why in a minute. And then finally, we got a research computing award at a conference for making the African origins map, which was my most intense front-end visual design undertaking ever. And David got to hear me cry on the phone. But he gave good feedback. Okay, so then we got all of these other grants, which, I'm sorry, I'm just sort of trucking through here, which necessitated a change in the site. And I'm going to show you why. It's because it necessitated us thinking about the infrastructure of the project. Infrastructure is the thing that you only notice when it breaks, right? And I'm ripping people off here, so this is not me being clever. It's the stink of sewage, and you suddenly realized there was a pipe there, right? It's necessary for digital humanists, in my opinion, to have some understanding. You do not have to be a coder. I have counseled so many undergrads and grads not to touch Python, but you do have to understand how it works, right? On a basic level, so that you can ask for what you need to make your project do what it's supposed to do. Because one of the worst things about the internet, there's a lot of bad things, since I was a kid, is that it's come to all look the same. It all does the same stuff. And that thing that it does is sit between you and what you want to see to part a fool from his money, right? It's all become highly commercialized. All of the design choices are identical, and there's a reason that programmers are getting fired now. It's because they keep making the same stuff and they put themselves out of business. But, no shade to them, they were told to, because their bosses are unimaginative. This technology was not made for you as humanists. If you want it to do something interesting, you have to know what to ask for, and you have to hire some creative programmers. And it's a massive undertaking, which means thinking institutionally, which means thinking infrastructurally. Okay, off my soapbox. Application. I am a Blake guy, by the way, and not a bad one. Okay, so I just have to keep doing this. All right, so this is what the site used to look like. People have complained that SlaveVoyages, and there are justifiable reasons for this. They've complained that SlaveVoyages abstracts the history of slavery and dehumanizes it, and at the end of the day, people want to know about people, right? And sometimes they get frustrated with the site, understandably, and they say, what the hell is a voyage, right? And I'm here to give you the most annoying answer ever. A voyage is an abstract entity that gathers together people, places, things, events, and documentary sources. And David's going to kill me for this. That's why it's Voyages. It's Voyages because that unit pulls together a huge amount of data from the transatlantic slave trade and the intra-American slave trade that otherwise would be unorganizable. You would not be able to know how many people were forcibly transported and, in order to be worked to death if they made it, right? If you didn't do this abstraction, it's like, it's a real devil's bargain, but it works. This is why it happens this way, right? That's why the site is structured this way. But when we got 2 grants, 1, to do people, and 2, to do documents, it broke the model. So in the upper right over there, you can see, so in the upper left, you can see what I just showed you. And the upper right, you can see what happens when we try to do what's on the bottom. You have a document, and this document, which is how it's always been for the researchers who have been in the archives, you've got all of these different classes of entities that are all connected in really rich ways. You have to make sense of the document, so you put it in the database in the old day. But now when you show that document to people, right, now you have to link to all those entities that it talks to. That is bananas when it comes to indexing. And when you do it with people, now that we are naming enslaved people, the data problem just balloons, right? So we started to see performance issues on the site after, through Herculean efforts by Domingues Delmonica, he managed to get the whole thing to work, right? We immediately were like, this thing, this foot does not fit this shoe anymore. We need to get, some comfortable walkers. Okay, so what did we do? We reimagined what the data structure should look like. And what we did here was a bit conservative in order to keep it recognizable and in order to make the data migrations possible at all, right? But what you notice here is that Voyages, for all its significance, right, has been slightly decentered. There are now sort of like 3 primary entities. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can see my mouse, right? Okay. So over here, Voyages still has the bulk of the core data that is key to the analytical questions that people want to ask about SlaveVoyages. But there's a huge amount of people data, and there's a huge amount of documentary data, and all of these things talk to each other. And they do on the legacy site still, right? But if you want them to do that, if you want to make the most of that, and if you want it to keep working, you have to rethink how the whole thing works. And this is how it works. What you have here is, this is the sort of complex view of that microservices model I was talking about. The front end, right, is all that yellow stuff. The back end is that thing in the middle. Okay? So the back end handles the database. It handles the classes of entities. It likes to make requests. And then you see these white boxes off to the left in the yellow. Each one of those is a mini application that's purpose-built to handle a specific kind of special query from, that goes to SlaveVoyages. The Django site takes it, and it farms those requests out. You want a graph? That pandas thing is what gives you the graphs. You want a network graph? We have an engine for that. You want a map? We have a different engine for that. Because these are all super specialized jobs. You have to understand the things that the SlaveVoyages researchers want computers to do, God bless them, right? Like, I think programmers should be put through their paces, even though I've been beaten to death by these guys. But like, you need to really think about what they're asking you to do, so you don't give them a half-baked solution that then has to stagger along for years, right? So what I think we've successfully done here is break out those different functions into different engines. All right, I got 5 minutes. I am watching. What? I'm getting a dispensation. Okay. So, platforming. I try to do puns every once in a while. Okay. So, but one of the things. So from a human perspective now that we've done the infrastructure, okay, cool, John. You did some neat coding. Why does that matter for people, for researchers, and then for people who come to use the website for a variety of different reasons? And a whole bunch of people who come to the website are kids on iPads on Google Classroom, all the way up to researchers who use the Save Search functionality in order to make footnotes that go in university-published books, and those Save Searches can therefore never fail, right? That is, I don't know of a website that has that kind of a spread of user base, right? Like, not Facebook, not Google? Okay, so, or at least those guys don't work. All right. So here, this one really stands out to me as super important. What we have is the work of one of Daniel's students, William Gillespie, and everybody here has done God's work. Like, the sources for SlaveVoyages were by blood, sweat, and tears and and the grace of God, kept in actual searchable order for years, which is incredible for anyone who's ever done a bibliography, right? It's a mess. Like, my bibliographies are always messes, and somehow they kept it in order. But obviously, over the years, some interesting things crept in, some irregularities, right? So what we did is we pulled all of those sources out and put them in Zotero, and then Daniel's student went through and hand-corrected everyone. And then we pushed them all back in Chicago Manual of Style. So they're flawless, right? That was William. And you only get that if you think in a microservices model. If you only think about purpose-built tools, they do one job or a couple really, really well. You keep them constrained to that, and you make the most of them. And you get the different services to talk to each other. Okay. I do think this is the model going forward. 2, William did some of this. I didn't know that you did some of this, Dionne, so I'm sorry you're not on the slide. That's my bad. Talon, you saw her talk on it, which gave like a wonderful treatment top to bottom as to how this is done. But I want to show you what it means to have a spreadsheet broken up in this way. What it means is you used to have a run of hundreds and hundreds of pages, just images, all day long, right? And you go to National Archives and Records Administration, when you look at those slave manifests for the coastwise traffic, you get just numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You go to the British Library, and they get a little classier. They say, folio 1 recto, folio 1 verso. Thanks, guys. Awesome. But you don't know what's in it. And as Talon pointed out, sometimes, the Huntington, excellent job, actually doing a table of contents, except they did the first document that appears on each page, which means that if a document starts and ends on the same page after another document has started and ended, it doesn't exist. So you drop entries, right? So people went through this with a fine-tooth comb in order to make this importable into Zotero, where we could then clean it up in order to get you that document viewer. Otherwise, if we cited a voyage pointing at a document or vice versa, the best we could have done is give you the first page it shows up on and then leave you to your, to your fate, right? Like, we couldn't tell you how many pages are in it, right? Whereas this way, we can have pages with overlaps. So you can say 3 pages here, 3 pages here, 1 page here, 2 pages here, all day long, right? We can even put dates in the title, as you're seeing. That, we actually felt really bad about doing that to people. Thank you again. And so that API model, and this I think is where things get really wild. The programmers who work for me, and here are a few called out who built this application down in Barbados, Vivienne Drakes, Rashawn Lane, and Darian Frederick. We needed a little bit, we needed something to work with, some really fresh data, right, that was really robust while we were waiting for ours to fully populate. So what we did is we took the API, the backend, and we wrote a custom application for it to do that document segmenting on the National Archives and Records Administration. So it wouldn't be in a spreadsheet, but instead it would be in a lightweight database so that you could pull all this image data in, have a mini, teeny tiny, 2 buttons search engine on SlaveVoyages, and then tie those documents in pairs back. Then I could just simply walk in and pair them, right? Because the data was in the perfect format, because a human didn't type it in. The human, on the other hand, no longer had to click back and forth, but had those images in front of them and a search engine to the right of it. Does that make sense? Okay. You can make these for any given project. You have a weird data set that needs to be married with this thing. All you have to do is figure out how those 2 data structures talk to each other, and then you need some genius programmers. So just, call Vivienne.
I'll hire you.
Don't hire them away. Okay. And then finally, transcription cleaning, right? And this one is fun. So, so Taylin was talking about how she did all of this training for folks down in Barbados as to how to read this historical handwriting, yeah? This is done, does anybody know Transcribus? Yeah? Okay, so Transcribus is this really phenomenal handwritten text recognition, which is like OCR for handwriting, okay? Engine that works off of AI, humanities project based in Europe, brilliant, those guys are great. But the killer that they have here, what makes their app work is the interface. You can see a line of text, you can see which one is highlighted there, right? You can see a line of text, you can see the transcription line, you can clean it up, right? And you have to clean it up because the machine gets it wrong, right? Is it good enough for government work? Right out of the box? 100%. Would Daniel blush to put that mess on the website? Yes. So you have to get in there and clean it up if you want to actually publish it to something of the caliber of SlaveVoyages. But the labor involved is enormous. And then I, in Barbados, and this is where the partnership got really interesting, apart from us giving you a free app for the NARA documents, you're welcome. Now I'm going to say thank you because we needed to train up 40 people in how to read this old handwriting, yeah? And how do you do that? And then I had a very clever idea, if I do say so. We had all of these half-baked transcriptions with on-page locations and a sweet interface where people could see what a machine thought it was and what the handwriting was. And what they did, instead of using AI to take humans out of work, right, we used the AI to ramp these people up super fast in order to be able to learn how to read it, because all they were doing was correcting a transcription, and that context feedback loop allowed them to get in the habit of it. And now they can, the crack team down in Barbados, we have 40 people who can read 18th century handwriting, right, off of pages that are browned from salt water and the iron gall ink that's burning a hole in them, right? Thank you. Okay. And this is, oh, it was much bigger on my screen. Okay. And so now, because I did it before, I have to say thank you to Shaquila Archer, Natasha Baird, Janice Bell, Deandra Bryan, Terrell Burnett, twice, although that's funny, he was one of our best transcribers, Sharnay Busby, Tawana Cadigan, Angela Darlington, Ashley Edwards, Shanante Ford, Tiffany George, Erica Holder, Chelsea Humphrey, Vanessa Jones, Elliot Kelman, Chrislyn Leslie, Rashad Lewis, Audrey Luke Morris, Shanice McMahon, Ndatola Marshall, Kristen Maynard, Fiona McCollin, Nikita Moore, Jamie Ann Paris, Brittany Payne, Miriam Phillips, Carrie Ann Pinder, Keisha Roachford, Shakira Scantleberry, Jacqueline Small, Shania St. Clair, Portia Tate, Savvy Thomas, Tamisha Watkins, Dana Williams, Talia Williams, Nasa Miller, Cottrell Clark, with assistance from the photographers on our team, Renica Griffith, Zaria Thompson, Ashley Muhammad, Shalissa Thompson, Rashida Paris, Raquel May Knight, Shay Thomas, Tamisha Yearwood, and Trudy Seeley. So that was, I'm giving them a big shout out because they have transcribed, I don't know if you saw it in the header, 6,300 of those pages are corrected now, cleaned up, and it's been a really good exercise for us, and I hope of benefit to the project. Okay, now I'm going to do one thing and show you what the payoff of all of this is, because no one wants to hear me talk about infrastructure all day long. This is the document search. I am going to do we have a ship. We can see who it's connected to. And we can see who they are connected to. If you want to see everything the South Sea Company did, detail page. If you want to explore any of those voyages, you can start to see the individuals who are directly associated with the slave trade and other entities like this. What's really fascinating is when you see some of these bridge and people get connected across different voyages. But I'm not here to click all day long. I want to show you one more. Everyone knows about the South Sea Company. This is me trying to sell David on the network graph. Please, David, please. You're a hater and I love you for it. Okay. Now we have, you know, they always say don't do it on game day, right? Okay. Well, I'll pull Chorley up. All right, so here, we have a woman, Chorley, who was owned by Edward Carter and was transported on this vessel with all of these other people. Uh-huh. You know that? Okay. All right. And then we have these two enslavers, the owner and then the shipper. And that shipper was involved in another vessel. Same ship, different year. And you can start to see how some of these people are big players and interconnected with each other. And who is your guy? Morgan. I don't have any Morgan documents, which is too bad, but I can tell you that this person's a big player. Maybe you want to look them up. Look at all these voyages they sent. Not as big as Morgan, but when you see these yellow ones, you can be... You don't have any what? Sorry? Oh, I don't have any documents. Sorry, yeah. No, I got ahead of myself. Here we are. This is that ship, that vessel. I apologize, not the ship. And as Daniel was talking about, here's the manifest behind it. Windows. There we are. It's hiding behind it. Okay. This is the manifest for that ship with the people's names on it. And if you were to look up those people, you would be able to turn back around. And Sean linked these, right, with that app I showed you. So you would be able to look at the record of that person and click back and see the document. So you can get it going both ways. Does that make sense? So I'm not just talking about cool tech stuff. There is humanistic payoff that speaks directly to some of the needs that people were discussing. So I hope that helps to justify the 90% of the rest of my talk. Thank you.
questions. We have microphones set up. Sabrina's question is, why did John not just download this ahead of time and take screenshots?
That's exactly
right?
my question.
That's why you
Thank
did.
Sabrina Smith, thank you for some outstanding presentations here from the entire panel. I did have questions for John, actually. But a question for the entire panel, which may have been mentioned and I missed. When will this be available for the public to use? I'm excited to teach with Slave Voyages, this new version of it, and research with it. So when will it be available? And for John, if you can talk a little bit about your experience in Barbados. Also with using Transcribus, my experience has been that you have to create a model and upload some 200 documents for it to actually maybe efficiently or semi-efficiently transcribe sources. So if you can talk a little bit about that, I've just been curious.
So I'm going to actually answer both to take the heat off Daniel, because it's entirely on me for this thing to launch, which is my, okay, so we're going to do a soft launch in the next couple weeks. Maybe not the public, but we can let the people in this room know. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Yeah? No, we're probably, okay, go on. All right. When did you start using Transcribes?
January, actually, so recently.
Okay, I haven't fully kept track of it, but I've noticed that a lot of their best models are sort of behind a paywall now. Are you paying for like the Scholar?
I haven't paid for it. You get 200 credits or units, right, for free?
Yeah. Yeah, if you, you can look up the SSC-1B model, which we made for South Sea Company, which is not behind the paywall, unless we didn't make it publicly accessible. So if you can't see it, that would be my only tip to you. I would say if you're gonna pay someone to do that, and it makes a lot of sense too, just get a small budget and try it out. Do it. Actually pay them. What their stuff does is pretty remarkable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, and make sure the images you upload are good. Go for about 10 to 20 megabytes. Try to look for artifacts, which is that like haze that you get around letters, right? When it tries to sample them to save space. Try to get something that's crisp.
Can I ask a question? Taking my prerogative to share this panel. John, we've had a lot of discussions around kind of amazing things we would like to do here. And like every panel, including like Dionne's presentation, you start thinking there's more and more we would like to do with this. How can this be done? I mean, do you think it's possible to add in everything we want to do? Or in other words, this is a relaunch, but it seems like we're already looking towards the next relaunch.
Hopefully. I've got no pride over my code. I would love to. My job in Barbados is to. I'm a white American consultant working on the history of the slave trade in Barbados. My job is to replace myself, right? My code base, right, should be iterated rapidly, and if somebody has something better, then it should get retired, right? That said, the framework, the architecture, I should say the architecture, because the framework would imply Python. The architectural decision to separate these into services, I don't think there's a better way to do it. I think you need the math done over here, the maps done over here, right? Full text indexing done over here, because these are all different jobs, right? And they have different computational requirements. And you can stand up a service super fast these days, right? As long as you have a decent API gateway to broker it all. And then the front end, there's no reason that your development of interfaces, and this is me getting to a creative answer that I'm then going to toss over to you. Yeah. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to rapidly try out new ways of presenting that data without breaking the data itself and vice versa, right? As long as everybody like agrees on what kind of data you're passing, right? There are so many more interesting ways to present the data on Slave Voyages. I tried out the network graph one because it was low-hanging fruit with all that people data. It was just crying out for it. It seemed to me that it had to happen. But coming back to the artists' workshop, Kathy's paintings, I spent some time talking with her about those voyages, and I was like, Kathy, is this actually a map? Like, what am I looking at here, right? And like, the closest I could come to describing what I thought it was from, and again, I was doing this as a programmer, I had my programmer's hat on, I am an aesthetician, I love art, but I had to think about, from a design perspective, how would I describe this thing to someone who could actually program the visualization? And I said to her, is this a map that is zoomed in so far that it stops to take on that global character and it becomes a different place? And these numbers come to be decontextualized in a way that you at the one hand both you on the one hand both see that like this happened in a place, it's an actual historical event, and then on the other hand that it could happen anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, good enough. Like, artists, right? But that's kind of the point, is that she was coming up with visualizations that would break the brain of any programmer, and that's her job. And then the programmer's job is to figure out, like, how close can I get to that vision, right? And this is me punting over to you. Inadequacies. What's better? You interviewed the artists.
No, but I don't have anything else to add to that. I think they should be able to explore through their view, right, how they want to interpret what they're looking at or the information. And then, yes, then you have to respond in that way. I don't think there's any other way. Like, it just has to be a continuous conversation. And I think the things that users desire will change or evolve, especially since the information we have is evolving. Mm-hmm. We unfortunately are going to become more demanding, right? As we get more information, we're going to want to see more.
Well, we see that happening right now. I mean, just looking at the recent history of the project, the CD-ROM came out in 1999, the new first version online 2008, the second 2019, and we started mobilizing, right, to prepare the third version the year after, 2020, right? It's already 2025, we're about to launch, right? And at our meeting here with the folks from the IQSS, we present, we spend about 30%, right, of our meeting time talking about the sustainability, the very basic. Now, the remainder of the meeting, we're then already so excited about what's to come, right? We'll think about what's going to be next, right? And we are here talking, Jorge gave the presentation about AI, how we can use AI. We have now, we're going to launch a version with a search bar on it, but that's already kind of outdated, right? Considering what Jorge presented about AI. Now, folks wanting to just type their query, right? And I have the website return a result, right? Yeah, you could speak your query, and in different languages, right? In different languages. So that's another barrier, right? That's being overcome. So this thing is going to be launched this year. Well, I'm very confident that folks will immediately start thinking about how the thing's going to look like 10 years from now at most.
Of course, I'm figuring, what's the shelf life for something like this? 2 years?
Yeah.
I mean, how rapidly do other things update?
Yeah.
If you decide to stay with the software framework that we chose, then you could keep rolling as long as Python and Django are a thing. But you don't keep it stale. You're constantly in there. They're like little bonsai trees. They need constant pruning and love, right? In order to do what they want. And to come back to the creativity side of it, splitting the front end and the back end means that you've got this platform for anybody who can make a good data visualization, if you give them permission, to try out something new, right? Yeah. And that I think I am really looking for it. And I said so years ago. Yeah. I am desperate, for some kid in like Louisiana to like make a better map than me so I can retire mine. That would be lovely. Right?
Yeah. So when is the new design is being relaunched when exactly?
So we're hoping to do the soft launch in 2 weeks,
yeah.
Right? And the hard launch, which will include the contribute page at the end of this year.
And then reasonably, how long do you expect it will be before it's launched again? I mean, just judging from the speed of technological change.
I am a believer in the continuous delivery of improved product.
So continuously.
That is something that we changed when we went to Rice. We took, and I forgot to give fully detailed credit to Domingues de la Monica. We looked at his development branch of the code base, which differed from the production branch of the code base. The production branch that everyone saw years ago was being manually pushed, and then it was being semi-automatically pushed up into the cloud, right? And what he had was one that you pull it down, and you can have it running on your laptop in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And we were like, I think we're going to use Docker. And then we tried it out just for development purposes, and then we put it up in that way in the cloud in Docker. And that has made our deployment times get cut down by like an order of magnitude. Yeah. And so you can rapidly update that thing, which allows you to catch errors, to roll things back, right, and to try out new stuff locally and test it thoroughly.
Well, yeah, that means it depends really on the capacity of your team, right? If your team has the capacity of doing interesting, creative things very quickly, they will be able to update the site, very quickly, right? The new infrastructure will allow us also to do like separate projects or highlight, interesting things on the data or the website, like we've done with the Texas slave trade information. So it's a lot more flexible at this moment, right? And so it's going to really depend on your team, right, and capability.
Is there an AI site that you prefer? I mean, I like Perplexity. Often I'll ask the same question of a couple AI sites, and so far Perplexity keeps winning.
I don't touch the stuff.
Huh?
I don't touch the stuff.
What did you say?
I don't use AI.
Oh, you don't do that?
No.
Why not?
I'm gonna have to. I know I am. But I need it to be a particularly well-scoped project with well-defined goals in order for me to have a clear understanding of whether or not it's doing what I want, right? Otherwise, I could get a bit lost in it. Like when I taught myself to do supercomputing, I taught myself in the old ways, high throughput computing, rather than message passing interfaces, high performance computing, in order to make sure that I'm not going to get into the details. I can see Daniel rolling his eyes. I apologize. Because for me, it's really important that when humanists, and honestly, data scientists, get into using a technology, I feel it's really important that they understand how it works. And that form of computing, by analogy, requires you to understand your problem space backwards and forwards, because otherwise, otherwise it's super inefficient. But if you know what you're doing, and by what you're doing, I mean you're a domain expert, then it works for you. And it scales infinitely. And so I'm afraid of the sort of sand trap of AI where it pulls us in too fast, and then
I use it as a liquid encyclopedia. Instead of typing the question, I speak the question to both, and then see, just for the hell of it, right? And ChatGPT is offered to everybody at Harvard just automatically now. But I was curious about that. I mean, I will never be too deep into whatever you just said. That won't be my problem. All I want to know is when Columbus, when he got to Cuba, and and I want to see which one gives me a better answer. So what is controversial, and this will be my last question, what's controversial about the redesign? Anything?
Controversial.
You said that our godfather back there, you were hoping that he approves of something, and one of you did. And I was curious what the context for that statement was.
Yeah, I think it was you, right?
David, with all the right reasons in the world, has reservations about the network graph. So when I clicked on South Sea Company, what did you see? You saw a ring of yellow because it's using what's called a force-directed layout algorithm, right? So you put all this stuff out there and it's connected, and it sort of jostles them around based on what's connected and what's not, and tries to organize them, and it usually does a pretty good job. But when you've got too much stuff that has the exact same relation, it turns into a ring. And when you've got and we've got way too much stuff, way too connected to everything else, then it becomes this unreadable spider web that's been derided in the data visualization community for years as a ridiculogram. And so,
Oh, the ridiculogram.
yes. And so, but the thing is, like, I guess I just haven't written the algorithm to determine when one of these things is going to be a ridiculogram or a simple ring, in which case I should turn the network graph off. I'm just trying to bring David on board with the idea of liking network graphs at all.
Thank you. This is great. I love this panel. Everyone was excellent. It really was quite exciting.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you and ask ourselves also, how do you think for the three and the four of us, or for the four of you actually, how you think about communication between the website and the community of users? Currently, we basically have two ways. One, if there is a search that goes wrong, that reports an automatic error, and then there is something like a user email that goes to a mailing list that probably 10 people in this meeting receive that email, and we reply depending on whether or not that goes to each of one specializations. And if it goes into Spanish, I usually reply that email. But if you go in other languages that any of you guys are the specialist, that goes into you. Thinking also about the engagement on the project with different communities of students, communities of teachers, communities of descendants, communities of people here in the United States, but also outside of the United States. Do you think like revamping that kind of relationship too? Because usually we go like, okay, let's keep the channels, but trying to make those channels easier, let's say that.
Yeah, well, the existing channels, I think they're going to continue there. Right? We're going to still continue receiving logs from our website, observing analytics. The listserv is going to continue. Now, engagement with communities in the U.S. and abroad. I mean, we make ourselves available, right? And we are open to partner with communities and help them in what they need. But it really depends on the researchers, right, involved. So researchers want to develop different aspects of the website, of the database. They normally have the initiative of reaching out to their respective audiences and community groups and engage with them, right? I mean, it's pretty impossible, like a handful of us, to engage with the whole world, luckily, individually.
But to libraries and universities than anybody else.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, if I may, since you said I could be included in this, if we think about the expansion into the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, I think it's going to become ever more important for us to find partnerships with people in the Middle East and Asia. And Daniel and I are already starting to think about like how can we go about creating those relationships. The workshop in Paris last year, you get to bring in European academics as partners, and some of them have, come to this conference as well, and to continue trying to build those relationships, because again, we're not going to have all of that context, but we also don't have the deep-rooted cultural knowledge that if we had more connections in Africa, if we had more connections in the Middle East, I mean, I think those are going to be crucial as we expand globally as well.
I think the redesign is a great opportunity. Don't leap across the table and kill me. For writing new lesson plans. And going out and doing more community outreach. Being proactive.
Yeah, you got to be proactive. I mean, we have a community of researchers here. SlaveVoyages is a community, is a network of researchers. And if they are able to engage with their respective audiences and be able to shepherd them into creating lesson plans, blog posts, or just projects, getting more data, right, and other interesting things. I mean, we are open, and we would like to support that, but we need help, right?
We are a member of a consortium,
Yep.
and people are located in different areas, so we may not have the representation in the Pacific or across the Indian Ocean, but we definitely can reach out to some of the groups that are already connected to
Yeah.
the project.
Yeah.
This may even be, and this is my personal interest, but the University of the West Indies, right? There's more that can be done in other spaces.
Yep.
Yeah. We've done in Texas as well. We're hosting the site there, right? Victoria knows all about it. Now she gave presentations at the Houston chapter of the African American Historical and Genealogical Society, right? We've also been in touch with local groups like Freedmanstown Conservancy, right? The NIA Cultural Center, right? Where they have actually that beautiful mural, right, of absolute equality mural, right? So we work very close to them. Yeah. Victoria, Caitlin, Ben, others organized poster exhibitions that circulated in Texas. We almost got to present our poster exhibition at the rotunda of the state capitol, but no, folks were a little, hesitant about it.
Okay, so I think we have time for one final question.
So my final question is for everybody in the panel. So in the past 25 years, we have seen an expansion on the scope of slave voyages for the initial concept of transatlantic slave expeditions to include now the intra-American, we have information of individuals or liberated Africans, and now we are expanding to other geographies. And my question is, where do you see, if you see any limit of expansion before that turns into just a database on slavery at large? And how these changes comes with a modification of the initial concept of the database in the back end, and how that's going to be undertaken in the future if those changes are undertaken. Because I know there are other projects, as you know, like enslave.org, that also has similar structures now.
No, our project is very different from theirs. We have one important role, right? Our database is the database of slaving voyages. It's organized around voyages of ships carrying enslaved people or that were outfitted to carry enslaved people. Now, we do add individuals to it, but there's an important rule. Those individuals, they must be connected to a voyage. We don't add any individuals, right? If we cannot identify in which voyage that individual was, right, we do not connect, right? So it's very different from what enslaved.org and other projects are doing, right? Their project is more focused on slavery, right? Ours is on slave trade, human trafficking.
Okay, the question is because
wait, one moment. Okay, I would agree with him and flip what you said on its head. David, at breakfast yesterday, told me that the African Names Project was that he had all of the data for it 20 years ago. It was ready to go, but there just wasn't, they didn't know what to do with it. There wasn't, or how to plug it into the existing data set, right? Or appetite, I'm not sure. Yes, he can give you the history. But that and working in the archives in Barbados, and someone asked, I was just going systematically, right? And then someone asked me, John, where are the slave voyages? And I was like, oh yeah. And so I walked to the back end of the database, and I hammered out everything that referenced Barbados Department of Archives. And I got a couple sheets, and I handed it to the research team. I'm like, get that volume in that page, get that volume in that page. And they come back in a couple hours, they're like, yeah, we got the voyages. And so we shot them. And that document viewer, right? Like, one of the problems I have with digital humanities writ large is its obsession with innovation and novelty and having to prove that you're doing something new at the expense of recognizing how many people have been there before you. If you want to see me really dunk on them, read my Shakespeare paper. But it's really important to recognize that a lot of this has been done before, or else you won't know what you're innovating on, and you won't be doing the work that humanists are supposed to be doing, which usually starts with reading. But sorry, that was my.
No, I just want to say, John, that if I may, that the reason why I'm asking this question is you showed something very interesting to me in your presentation. That seems that it's a slight change the way I understood them. I might be wrong on that, on the architecture of the back end of the database. The original common identifier was the voyage. And you were saying something in which you are now centering the document. So that implies a modification, if I got it right, I might haven't got it right, but it implied a modification on the structure of the variables on the database in the back end. That seems to me similar, because I have been related also very closely to the database at MSU, and they kind of have a similar notions of identifiers, place, document, and whatnot, and you center a document now. And that's what I was asking if this modification is driven by possibilities of expansion, or what does that mean exactly in the overall architecture of the database? Does that make sense? If I get it right, it might be just...
No, and I wasn't arguing against you just now. You just opened up a window for me to...
But can you explain more like this, what you mentioned about the architecture?
So it's, there's a way in which I overstated it, because it's always been a relational database, and there's always been like a sources table, and there's always been a captains and owners table, right? But right now, but then David came in with a bunch of European enslavers who had wills and spouses in those wills. And like, good God, now what do you do, right?
Yeah, what do you do with those?
And so enriching those entities did mean taking more seriously what it meant to be able to query and present that data, right? And so that meant making the query architecture more standardized internally, and in its external presentation, and in asking some hard questions about the structure of the relational database, and there were some changes that happened behind the scenes to make it happen. But it's not like a graph database or anything.
Okay.
It's still, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great panel.
We can clap for ourselves.